the Tasmanian Timber Promotion Board, who is sponsoring this and are the peak body for the Tasmanian industry. The Promotion Board's a corporate body established by an act of the Tasmanian government in 1970. So, 54 years later, the aim of the board is still to set out, as in the Act, to promote the use of wood in Tasmania and elsewhere. It is charged particularly with promoting timber produced in Tasmania. To discharge this aim, the board researches into the use of wood and its derivatives, sawn timber and timber products, markets timber and timber products, disseminates information on using timber and timber products. The board is funded by a government-imposed levy collected from the sale of all Crown saw logs to support those who are using Tasmania's beautiful timbers and showcase the companies and groups that produce and sell it. This is only just the tip of the iceberg. The Tasmanian Timber Promotion Board has been working with the University of Tasmania with the Centre for Sustainable Architecture in Wood for, again, nearly 3 decades. It's a very strong supporter of seesaw, and seesaw is a strong supporter of Tasmanian timbers, and a lot of the work that's going through now with the new AFWI process, as people might be aware of, will go through seesaw to look at taking not only Tasmanian timber forward, but also look at starting to transition the regrowth and regenerated timber supply to grow into a plantation supplied base. It also sponsors the Tas Timber website, which is just about to be revamped and relaunched, which has a wealth of data on it, as does the WoodSolutions site. So it's been a long-running thing that the timber companies have supported and have actually put extra money in to get us to where we are today. Content overview on the Tasmanian Timber Promotion Board. I'm just going to make a simple supply statement in a moment and then talk about the availability of Tas oak, talk about Tas oak, a little bit about blackwood, other Tasmanian species, products. Then of course, certification, which comes up as a major question for everything that we do, especially in mass timber, chain of custody, and a little bit on carbon. I've left this specifically blank because we're waiting for the government to actually come forward with an official statement. But the statement that we've received at the moment, that we have guaranteed supply through to 2040. We have a 25-year window broken into 3-year statements, which is underway at the moment. So the big thing there is no issue in the supply of Tasmanian oak or of Tasmanian timber in general. There is no issue from the supply from STT, Sustainable Timbers Tasmania. And there is a growing amount of plantation available through both STT and other private areas, which we'll talk about when we talk about mass timber and other bits and pieces. But the real, I suppose, message to this is that there has been some scuttlebutt that Tasmania was going down the same route as Victoria or WA or anywhere else. We have over 60% of our forests are already locked into heritage areas and other things. We only have a small amount of material that's sustainably available. It's all regrowth and regen. It's mainly Tas oak, the 3 species that make up Tas oak, but there are others like blackwood and things that are going to come to fruition. But we're here to stay. We're guaranteed to at least 2040 and then into the future. Longevity, again, we do have this guarantee from the government and STT that they'll support it and they have a sustainable plan going forward. Sources, public, being Sustainable Timbers Tasmania. And then there are a large private quotient which will be available even before that time of 2040. I'm actually looking at some delicatenses at the moment at 25 years to 30 years old to look at utilising it in mass timber. The stage transition to plantation is underway with upwards of potentially 100,000 cubic metres a year available to the industry on top of the sustainably sourced regen and regrowth material. Tasmanian oak, what a beauty. One of the last blonde timbers available out of Australia. It's a preferred hardwood for various applications. Scantling, which I've left in, but it's not so much. The utilisation of Tas oak in all its grades has come further to the fore of appearance, so we get better value. Panelling, flooring, glue-laminated spans, which is what we do, veneers, plywood and furniture. Of course, we've seen a multitude of beautiful furniture from Tas oak. It's also fibre for reconstructed boards and producing high quality paper, which is a market that's still available. The amount of chips going out is still large, but the companies that are looking there are also looking at alternates. What sets Tasmanian oak apart is not just its versatility, but its exceptional quality. It does work well, it finishes well, it stains, screw retention. All of this is available on the Tas Timber site. Again, I've left in Scantling, but very rarely used unless it's in a glue-laminated or a CLT, a GLT or a CLT cross-laminated. Versatility at board level. The big thing that we're seeing at the moment is an increase in veneers. We've been making plywood here for a little while, and laminated timbers are also available as in engineered flooring and other fit outs. The veneers, I must admit, are taking that high quality and stretching that sustainable resource to its very limit, so we can use it more and more. This is also true for mass timber applications, CLT, GLT, stair tread stringers and landings. We've seen personally a 400% uptake in the last 2 years since we've started with CLT and GLT. Initially, our company is based on plantation. We do a little bit in the way of stair treads and GLT in Tas oak when required, but again, we'll talk about that. Its eucalypt fibre is highly sought after for reconstructed boards and paper, again, but the big thing is that it's a light colour, it's recognisable, and it's got excellent working qualities. River's Edge at the University of Tasmania by Wardles, and a beautiful photo by Dave Groves, just shows the amount. These are all ply products. Ply over a substrate to stretch the resource to actually ease of construction. The commercial fit out is endless in this area, and it's just such a beautiful biophilic feel. An interesting area which has a mix of Tas oak, and if you can see the floor is regenerated 40-year-old blue gum, which is grown in the Southern Valley, which is a regrowth, regenerated, actually fully regenerated coop. There's no pure native forest in that floor, and it's gorgeous. Variegation of colours, beautiful. The actual laying of the floor was straightforward. The longevity of it, yeah, it's got very high traffic, showing no signs of wear in the first 2 years. Then, of course, natural beauty. If you look at something like this, is a Tasmanian built Simon Anchor couch. It's gorgeous, blackwood veneer. The multitude of timbers in this build and the actual natural beauty that it induces in this kind of setting is just stunning. All of these timbers are still readily available. So, you know, I have to keep coming back to this. There is no lack of supply out of Tasmania. And if you contact the Tasmanian Timber marketing campaign or the Wood Encouragement Officer, which are both listed on the Tas Timber website, they can sure point you in the right direction and give you a helping hand in specification or other supply issues. All right, simple breakdown for Tasmanian timbers can be grouped into structural boards, which is stick frame, scantling and treated. There are still a lot of a lot of treated materials coming out. We're now treating a whole range of products for a whole range of applications. Appearance boards, rough sawn material, skim dress rough sawn material is sold to a lot of furniture manufacturers and secondary producers. But we're also selling, and you would have been into Bunnings and seen the flooring, decking, cladding, fit out materials, including architectural considerations, battens, especially if you look at the beautiful Porter Dow selections. Yeah, there's a multitude of things that go with the other considerations like Britain's veneers and the Neville Smiths and the McKay's products for the lamination and the Neville Smiths products for the engineered flooring especially stand out. A classic floor in the Hobart City Hall. I couldn't find a picture of the before, but this was severely water damaged in a flood earlier on this decade. And this has been replaced with exactly the same Tas oak flooring in the same profile. It's just a gorgeous, and it looks like a render, but the reality is that's the breadth and the natural beauty of that floor. Engineered flooring, as I say, Woodsmith by Neville Smith Forest Products. It's hit the market, taken off, beautiful product, hard wearing, easy to lay. It's just a great extension of taking this top quality material and using it as a 5 or 6 mil lamella into a product that can fit into any type of application. I just did mention the Porter's Dowels, and this is the down lighting on a set of dowels, which is just at the Crown Casino. It's just phenomenal. I suppose where I'm going with this is that Tas oak is there. It's not just boards. It's any product that you're willing to ask for is possibly available or could be available. Yeah, further products. We do a lot of materials into appearance, flooring, internal linings, laminated products like stair treads, stringers, landings, and handrails. Set length and custom products are really coming to the fore, as is the structural mass timber elements and artefacts, CLT and GLT. At Cusp, we are predominantly, as I stated before, looking at taking plantation materials, especially eucalyptus nitens that was headed for the wood chip pile, and utilising it into beautifully finished CLT floors, GLT beams, and supplying Australia-wide. The one thing that we have found is that we have a preference for position in the tree, which allows the sawmillers to actually take the best looking appearance material out and utilise it in that product. And several of them are running and starting to run a line of nitens. Britain's Veneers run a line of beautiful white veneers from nitens. And we, of course, supply CLT and GLT floors, walls, ceilings, beams, anything you could ask for. Just as a bit of an ad for the company, we're also open to other species, but predominantly the plantation ukes is what the business is built on. Again, aesthetic appeal, a mixture of solid and veneers. It's just such an open, warm, inviting timber, and the Wardles design team have used it to its utmost. As you can see, we've got bent laminated rails. Again, design looking down through the atrium area with the veneer panels in conjunction with the solid rails. Mass timber floors and stairs. These are a set of stairs that we delivered just as a side issue. There's four landings, 3 flights. The time for installation was 4.5 hours. There's a matching set of concrete stairs on the other side, which by virtue of the concrete process took 7 weeks. So it tied up that building area for 7 weeks where these beautiful aesthetic, biophilic, just warm, beautiful stairs to walk up. Took 4.5 hours from installation. And I will admit that was probably an hour too much because we delivered to the wrong site. Veneer. I've been spruiking veneer. I see this, the use of veneer as one of the ways to really extend the sustainable yield out of the Tasmanian forest. Along with the solid, it just stretches that productivity. Britton's and several others do, but Britton's in Tasmania are the only timber company that still slices, not peels, which makes, to my mind, a far superior product for this type of layups. Veneer, with its wide range of species and grades, is a versatile product, can be assembled into a sheet or cut into assembled patterns. The versatility allows for creative applications, which goes without saying. And it's also a natural, sustainable alternative resource use with solid materials, especially timber, to sustainably and sensibly stretch and resource the challenge and designer's ability to mould and shape a build. Again, if you need information, the companies are listed on the website and what they supply, but you can also go to the marketing campaign itself and to the wood encouragement officer through the Tas Timber line and get this information and talk to the person up front. One of my favourite pictures, this is looking up at the atrium from where we saw the blue gum floor, just to see what could be done with veneer and shapes, you know, in a purely architectural fashion. The roof beams you see there, unashamedly, are from ash and Vic ash. Yeah, and it's just a perfect meld. But with the diminishing in the Vic ash supply, of course, Tasmanian oak is always and will always be there to take over its place. Other Tasmanian species: blackwood, celery top pine, myrtle, sassafras, Yuan pine, and radiata. I suppose I'll start from the top. Blackwood has been and will always be probably second rate, the second spot and the second most used Tasmanian timber. It's still available. It's still beautiful. Several companies have it. It's made into all the products you can imagine. Celery top pine is fairly restricted because of supply. Myrtle has been out of favour, but has now come back in, especially with the importation of grandis from Uruguay and others, breaking the barriers with the reds. So myrtle, which is a more robust, a beautiful coloured material, is back. Sassafras, and as you can see from the veneers at the St. Luke's build, it's just gorgeous. Yuan pine, again, a rarity, very well controlled, only milled through a couple of sawmills, very highly prized and very expensive, rightly for the reason that a tree will never be cut down ever again, and it's only reclamation of salvage wood that allow this material to be available on the market. Radiata pine, Tasmania has a plethora of radiata pine through companies like Timberlink and the like, in all styles, species, types of material. A lot of it's predominantly framing, but there are other products available. Certification. Okay, what is forest certification? Forests play a crucial role in the global environment. We know this. Sustainable forestry is a forest management system that extracts timber while balancing the forest's ecosystems and needs and regenerating the harvest timber. Forest certification ensures that a forest is being sustainably managed. And I think that's the key. The timber is coming from a forest harvested responsibly. Certification guarantees that timber is renewable, well-managed resource that will be here for generations to come. Most of the material coming out of Tasmania is PEFC. PFC is the program for the endorsement of forest certification, is the world's largest, and I must stress this, is the world's largest forest certification system. PFC is a non-profit, non-governmental organisation. PFC works throughout the entire supply chain, and it does. We have it from one end to the other. To promote good practice in the forest, ensure that forest-based products are produced with respect for the highest ecological, social and ethical standards with rigorous checks and balances, external auditing and other things. PFC is a global alliance of national certification systems. The Australian representative of PFC is Responsible Wood, whose vision is to ensure that the Australian forests and all products sourced from them rank amongst the most sustainable in the world. And I think they're there. And their certification guarantees that the forest products are sourced sustainably and are socially just, are ecologically sound and economically viable. In Australia, over 16 million hectares of forests are covered under the scheme, which cover 90% of the Australian commercial forests. FSC. CUSP up to recently have been a holder of both PEFC and FSC. FSC is the Forest Stewardship Council. It's an international non-profit organisation again. It's responsible management of the world's forests via timber certification. FSC unites individuals, business, governments and NGOs under a common goal, protecting healthy, resilient forests forever. What's the difference? Key question, what is the difference? Both PEFC, Responsible Wood, and FSC accreditation systems are used in Australia, and the two schemes have more similarities than differences. Both systems have rigorous global standards, and the Australian timber processes stock timber that has both PEFC and FSC certification. The main difference is that FSC requires continuous improvement, which is difficult to achieve in Australia as the standards of forest management are already very high. Unlike in emerging countries with less forest regulation, continuous improvement is less attainable in Australia. This is not the only difference, but it's one of the key things. And as put to me by one of the very large forest managers, it's very hard in Australia because we're already there and exceeding the international standards, where some other countries are still struggling with corruption, labour, and all the other issues that both PEFC and FSC are there to prevent. And does it really matter? It does not matter what certification scheme is used. What matters is the timber selected by specifiers is certified. All Tasmanian timber is sourced from sustainable forests, and there is a chain of custody certification for Tasmanian wood products that can be used to trace wood products back to their sustainable managed source. Chain of custody. Chain of custody is a proof that you have taken a product that you can actually trace back. You can look at a table that's sitting in a store that has a chain of custody AS4707 logo on it and chase that back to find where every log came from, when it was felled, and it can be tracked through the coop, where it was harvested, the forest practice plan that ensured the coop was sustainably managed, and timber processes then do all the tracking to the point of sale. And then we have other customers that take that point of sale and take that chain of custody to the market. Be very clear. If you see chain of custody, please check that they actually have. It's all right to see a swing tag on something, but the real proof is the chain of custody actually in place? Can we take that back to prove the sustainable yield? Chain of custody, peace of mind, ensure the end consumers are purchasing has come from a managed forest. So, as I said, please never be embarrassed to ask the question. Ask the question of your suppliers. Can you give the certification? Can you show me what scheme you're under? Tasmania and most of the Tasmanian Forest Products Group are under a company and scheme called Wood Connect, which is managed by Bruckner Leach. It's a great thing. We would have not had either of the certifications if it wasn't for this company that helped us work through with some pain and a very large amount of rigour. We get audited regularly. The other thing with the group scheme is that it's all in one in. It keeps the whole industry in Tasmania very honest in this area, because if one fails, everyone fails. So please take that into account, that there is a collegial thing with certification, and there's an onerous amount of rigour goes into making sure that it's kept up to date. Okay, chain of custody. Licensees commit to only claiming certification on wood from forest certified. Licensees are trained to use the documentation, annual audits, and the chain of custody system is independently audited to the responsible wood certification scheme annually by an accredited certification body, which in this case is Global Mark. So yeah, rest assured that we make sure that every stick going out that we claim on is actually there. I just threw this in the end because it was a question that I keep getting asked, but if I just lip back to the chain of custody. Chain of custody starts predominantly with Sustainable Timber Tasmania, who manage 800,000 hectares of public production forest, but only cut down 137,000 cubic metres. Now, if you take 137,000 cubic metres, which sounds a lot on a first take, it's a sustainable yield out of this 800,000. The chain of custody starts at the forest management level. I threw in the carbon because it's a question we get asked, especially with mass timber and floors. So carbon sequestration, the sustainable use of global carbon balance. We must lower our carbon output and create carbon sinks to counteract the unavoidable emissions we produce and those that have already been emitted. Sustainable forest management teams with timber construction is an effective system to help with this. There is enormous, though untapped potential for long-term carbon storage from buildings, because most non-timber construction materials store little to no carbon or emission intensive to create. That was from Planet Ark. Growing forests are growing carbon. They absorb it from the atmosphere. Mature trees do not suck in as much carbon as younger growing trees, so therefore plantation is a boon for the carbon. A harvested tree retains the carbon in its timber. The tree that is regenerated in its place, as required by sustainable forest management, will suck in more carbon as it grows. The great beauty in that is the built environment, that carbon can then be stored for many decades, in some cases centuries. It is a significant contributing factor in the comparison to other more carbon intensive materials. On that, we've also seen in the last 6 months an uptick in the want and need from architects, designers looking at life cycle analysis. Not only life cycle analysis, but how to actually disassemble a building and reutilise the material has become fore in some of our conversations on larger builds. If this building is only suitable for 50 years or 50 years worth of use, and we want to keep the carbon, we want to keep the timber, how do we design it so we can actually pull it down, revamp it, rechange it, rebuild it, reutilise this material? And I will say that while this has always been a subject, the last 6 months, it has become a real talking point. Okay, back to Tas timber, Tas oak, available, not an issue. 137,000 metres into the sawmills per annum of sawn log and veneer product. It's ongoing. It's ongoing for the next 25 years and into the future. Durable, sustainable, and of course, as we can see from the photos, very beautiful. Thank you, Kylie.
Thank you so much for that presentation, Michael. That was really informative, and I got a bunch of questions to ask you to open up the discussion to the floor. And I would encourage our participants, like, now's the time to ask about Tasmanian timber. We have one of the foremost experts who's been in the game for many decades, so please ask your questions. Now's the time. Yeah, it's interesting. the different key points that you're making really play into this idea that Tasmania is like a more extreme version of what we're experiencing on the mainland in general.
Yep.
The supply is more acute. Um, Perhaps it's a more cohesive ecosystem of suppliers and forest managers. So you're having to address some of these issues that perhaps the mainland is addressing in a more fragmented way. Um, you talk about which is really fascinating. You talk about the long-term forest management. Is that that securing that supply up to 2040, as you say, is that primarily in the form of land that is allocated to plantations for at least that long?
Yeah, it's a regeneration of that land, but it's also the turnover into plantation.
Right.
So um, there is and there always will be a thought that plantation at a point will become a full stream product. And as I say, it is at the moment and we use it. As I said, specifically, we like to leave the butt logs and the second logs to the sawmills so they can actually get product out of it. Then we take the material with the knots and the inclusive limb trace and that, and we're utilising this material that would have went to wood chip to make beautiful, as you saw, those stairs,
Yep.
and we have things like Cusp have done panels, CLT panels, which have a 100-minute fire rating. And I must admit, we probably could have got 150. Now, a commercial rating's 90. We're far exceeding. It's all about the IP, the layup,
Of course.
and what we put into it, the research that's been put into it.
Yeah. As we know, this whole game is about trying to get more fiber into more uses because the supply can expand to a point, but we can see the end of that process.
Yep.
Are you seeing is that the strongest reason that CUSP initiated in the first place? Like it's obviously quite unique being a mass timber supplier in Tasmania. Is that a direct response to these initiatives from forestry?
No, the initial impetus was that our managing director drove past the wood chip pile of Burnie. We have a massive wood chip pile that sits on the wharf to go out to markets, specific, primarily in Asia. His question was, can we utilise this timber for something else? And what would it be? We'd had previously in Tasmania, we'd had other materials used to try to replace stick frames and things with nitens. It wasn't a success. But with mass timber, it's the sum of the total. So to glue it up into a mass timber laminate, into a GLT, or even more so into a CLT, and we're the first company in the world to hit those goals with a CLT. Yeah, that was a driver. Then came the STT material and the private forests who are also looking for alternatives. A lot of the larger players have, said they'd like to go a third, biomass fuel, timber products and wood chip to defray their risk into the market. But
Yeah, I suppose that
yeah,
would mitigate a lot of their risk. You
yep,
mentioned private forests, so um, I aimed one of my CPD questions around that the two sources of Tasmanian oak and the transition. So those two sources are the public and the private. Could you
yep,
describe what those differences are and what the transition to plantation means in terms of private
yep.
public ownership?
So the private forest is primarily plantation material. Some of it's of age, some of it's getting towards age, some of it's of an age where we specifically are going to look at taking some logs and seeing what we can do with it. It was always planted in mind of saw log production, as opposed to the fibre production material of the bulk of the nitens that's in the private hands of the larger companies that are feeding these other things. Uh, they're not thinned and pruned. They're not planted in that way. They're planted as a rotational crop. Even now, they're looking at extending the times on that to get better outcomes out of it. So we're looking at, I'll give you, for instance, we're looking at a large Cooper delicatensis in the middle of the state that's been planted as a crop. Um, They initially thought that it'd be a 50-year rotation. We're now looking at it 25 years. So that's the difference. The STT material in the Tas oak, which will probably go to plantation, and I'm just waiting for their statement, but it's regenerated and regrowth. So it's naturally sown. It's material. It's areas that have already been logged that they've regenerated and they've turned through and through and through. And some of these are at second rotation, even in my lifetime, let alone the 120 years that the industry's been going.
It's very nascent, isn't it? Like that's a very short time frame to be doing this sort of thing, as opposed to like
It
the
surely
oldest one is like Japan has thousands of years of forestry management. But yeah, 120 years is basically juvenile on the global human scale of management, isn't it?
it's interesting, and we've shortened those timeframes down. When I first came into the industry in Tasmania, we were pillaging the forest. So there's no stepping back from it. That the government had to step in, and this sustainable yield took too long to come, but it's here and it's now and it's sustainable. We know where it is. We know what the supply line's going to be. So I think that's the key part of the message, that Tassie timber's here to stay and we can supply anything you're after.
On that note of supply, what is the typical process of someone from, say, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, getting a hold of products like this and specifying it? Are there timber yards that stock caches of these products on the
Oh,
mainland, or is it all?
yep. Multitude of them. So all of the major centres, including Brisbane, have holdings of Tas oak. So yeah, no, look, the Tas oak's available all across Australia. There's a plethora of outlets up the eastern seaboard. If they come back to the Tas Timber website, they'll find all the producers and what they produce. They can go to them directly, or if they want to step back and get some more technical nuanced stuff, they can go through the Wood Encouragement Officer, who's stationed at the Centre for Sustainable, well, I can't even say it, Architecture in Wood at UTAS, and they can then put you through to the right people and give you suggestions, look at all the technicalities. If you want to look at mass timber, we're not the only company in Tasmania making mass timber laminates, but we're probably the largest, and the only one really doing it at any level in the plantation.
What lines of research are CASP looking at the moment? Like, is there any anything you can share in terms of like strand materials or other kinds of compositions
Yep.
that your team is really interested in?
Yeah, we're really interested in a whole heap of things at the moment. So as you know, we started just pre-COVID, and remember, this company didn't have a stick on the ground in 2019. Then we hit COVID, so it was a very slow build. So over the last couple of years, we've had the first commercial hardwood CLT at volume. We've also got the world's strongest
That's the St. Luke's.
Oh, that's St. Luke's floor. Yeah, for instance. And it's all about horses for courses. There is a definite place in the business for softwood CLT, and the St. Luke's has a couple of floors of that's covered. It's non-visual. It's a price point thing. The large beams at St. Luke's we tended for, but didn't have a press big enough. We've now bought a press, so hopefully when the next St. Luke's comes along, we can get the beams, and that they would be plantation hardwood as well. So yeah.
On the Tasmanian oak, you mentioned that there are three species that make up Tasmanian oak, and Tasmanian oak's trade name. There's often some confusion around trade names versus individual species and how that interplay works. What are those three species, and how
Yeah,
does that
Regnus
work?
delicatensis and obliqua. It's actually interesting that you will get several areas have predominant species. The Yuan Valley has a lot of obliqua, which is a different obliqua than the northwest, with up around the Smithton area, which has its own special type, mainly borne by the wet areas and that up there. And the Central Highlands has still got a lot of the big delicatensis and regnants that are always been available. They grow quickly up there, so there's still some of those larger trees, even though they're only regens at 60 years old, they're still there. Yeah. We have one company, Neville Smiths, that do all regrowth, while the others take, and that's regrowth at around the 45 to 50 years average, while the other companies have got slightly older and different inputs. Quite regional in the small
Uh,
state.
mm. You mentioned on the topic of veneers, you were
Yep.
discussing the difference between slicing and peeling. Would you mind expanding on that and
Okay,
describing what those differences are?
slicing is simply, if you've seen your slicer at home that you do your onions on, something like that. That's a very crude analogy, but slicing is exactly that. It's sliced. It comes off as a perfectly sliced and matched piece. So when you peel, it's a higher speed. You get across. You don't get the chance to look at the material. So I think it's a more nuanced process and a better finish from what I've seen. That's only on a personal level, but I've looked at both. The matching and that on the material that's been sliced always seems to come up to a better product.
Right, that makes sense. So the peeling, a slice is going to be your whole trunk, whereas a peel is going to be some small section of that trunk,
Yeah. So
and so the grain matching is always going to suffer.
exactly. So you're cutting out a proportion of the trunk into a block, then you're slicing through that block, so you can literally book match it.
Yeah.
You can, you know what I mean. So yeah, it makes a really attractive product.
How does the electricity makeup in Tasmania help your environmental credentials and certifications down there? Like we hear a lot about electricity
Oh,
supply and how Tasmania is really excelling at that. Would you mind expanding a bit on that?
oh no. The hydro supply, which has been in since the late 1940s, just after the war, gives us a very clean green power grid. So we do very little. We have one large power station that's on standby but doesn't really feed back. So, most of our power comes from this hydro system, which is just water-based, gravity fed to turbines, um, totally renewable, and with Tasmania's um, rainfall never really been an issue in the last few decades. As you know, we have a large extension cord that runs over to Victoria.
Mm. How do you
So
find the process of exporting the CLT or in particular the Matin products over from Tasmania?
it's not an issue. No, it's supply to the mainland, dropped into Melbourne or Sydney is definitely not an issue. We personally use, if we're going to Adelaide or WA, we use train from Melbourne or Melbourne specifically. Other companies have other avenues, but no, there's not an issue on supply. That's for sure.
Oh, fantastic. Well, just about wraps up our time allotted for Q&A. Is there anything else that you'd like to leave the audience with? Any particular comments or places that they should go visit to see the most of Tasmanian timber if they were to spend
I,
time in Tasmania or anything of that
I,
nature?
there's some beautiful areas to go and see. There's some areas in the Central Highlands, one that's got a full wall of carvings in yew and pine, which is just a gorgeous artifact to see. Mona and others have a lot of Tas timber in it. Things like the St Luke's building are well worth a visit. You're looking at a plethora of veneers, GLTs, CLTs, mass beams, as is the UTAS campus at Inveresk. That shot of the Wardle designed atrium there just didn't do it justice. It's well worth walking up our CLT stairs to have a look at that atrium. It really is a thing of beauty. But it's a thing of beauty that's, as I say, has been extended by the use of veneer and solids, and it's all available. Please jump onto the Tas Timber website and have a look. If you don't want to go direct, as I say, wood encouragement officer or hit the question line.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, Michael. I really enjoyed your time. I'm sure the audience has as well. Um, Thank you so much.
Thank
Before
you.
we jump, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Before we jump off, I'll just do a quick little outro. So, yeah, Our next Wood Solutions webinar series installment will be on Tuesday, the 29th of October. Please note this is actually not in the first week of November due to the Melbourne Cup. That will be on a fantastic case study of Portland's new international airport terminal by Timber Labs' Jared Rebe. My apologies. Definitely worth checking into that one, but please note the earlier time than usual. Also, the Australian Timber Design Awards for 2024 is happening soon on the 16th of October, which is very, very soon. The awards night will be happening in Sydney. So if you are in Sydney and you want to see the very best in timber design of the last year, there are some stunning projects on display. And of course, the winners of the various categories are being announced. Get your tickets. If you do a quick Google, you'll find that. Get your tickets, come along. It's a great way to network with industry. This group of people doesn't get together that often in the way that this event allows. So if you're around in a couple of weeks in Sydney, grab your tickets and come along. And that's all from me. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Michael, for sharing your wisdom and your time this morning to be here with us. And we'll see you in the next webinar. Thank you so much. Ciao.